I'm not exactly proud of it, but, yeah, I ended up getting involved with my wife's friend, Laura. I know what you're probably thinking. How could I do that? Believe me, I get it. It was messed up. But if you knew what Sophie put me through, maybe you'd get it too. Or maybe not. But anyway, that's how all of this started. It's been weighing on me for a while now, and I just need to get it off my chest. No more holding back. Before everything fell apart, Sophie and I had what most people would call a solid marriage. We clicked, or at least I thought we did. She used to be the supportive, understanding type, and we had this easy rhythm in our lives. She was always the one to listen, always made sure we had time together, no matter how busy things got. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. And trust me, it wasn't a slow change. It hit me like a ton of bricks. When I look back on it, I realize it all started when Sophie became close friends with Laura, her new best friend. They met at a work event or maybe a yoga class. Honestly, I can't even remember anymore. But Laura was everything Sophie wasn't. She was wild, spontaneous, always out doing something, living for the moment. At first, I didn't mind it. I figured Sophie could use someone to balance out her seriousness, maybe even have a bit of fun for once. But soon, Sophie started spending more and more time with Laura. At first, it seemed harmless, just a couple of drinks after work, maybe hitting a bar on the weekends. But it quickly turned into a routine. Every Friday and Saturday, Sophie would head out with Laura to this club downtown. You know the type. Overpriced drinks, bad music, and a crowd of wannabe influencers trying to get the perfect Instagram shot. That's when I started noticing the cracks. We weren't spending time together like we used to. I'd ask if she wanted to go out, maybe catch a movie or grab dinner, and she'd brush me off, saying she was too tired or had plans with Laura. This wasn't the Sophie I knew. She started dressing differently too, tighter clothes, lower cut tops. I didn't mind it at first, but something about it just didn't sit right. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram, passing the time while she was out again. There was a picture of her and Laura at the club. They were both clearly drunk, arms around each other, grinning like nothing mattered. But it wasn't the photo that got me. It was the guys in the background, standing way too close to them, looking way too comfortable. I felt this sinking feeling in my stomach, like something was off, but I couldn't figure out why. I tried to tell myself I was just overreacting. But then, the little things started to add up. Sophie was growing more distant, and it wasn't just because of her going out all the time. It was the way she stopped looking at me, like I didn't even exist anymore. She stopped asking how my day went, stopped wanting to do the things we used to enjoy when she was home. It felt like she was checked out. I'd ask about her nights out, and she'd give me the same tired response, "Oh, it was fun. Nothing much to tell." But something felt off, and I couldn't shake it. I tried talking to her about it one night. I remember sitting her down in the kitchen, wanting to have a real conversation about how I was feeling. I told her I missed spending time with her, and that it seemed like she was more interested in going out with Laura than being with me. And what did she do? She rolled her eyes, as if I was the unreasonable one. "You're being paranoid," she snapped. "Laura just likes to go out. Don't be such a control freak." I wasn't trying to control her. I was trying to understand what the hell was happening to us. But every time I brought it up, she either got defensive or dismissive, like my feelings didn't matter. So, I stopped asking. I figured maybe I was overthinking things and just needed to trust her. But deep down, I couldn't. I tried to push the nagging feeling away, but it wouldn't go. Then one night, it all clicked. Sophie had gone out with Laura again. Same excuses, same routine. I was at home, scrolling through my phone, feeling restless and maybe a little desperate for answers. I checked social media again. There was another post from Laura, this time a video. They were at that same club, laughing and dancing. But this time, something was different. I noticed a guy in the background standing way too close to Sophie. He was leaning in, whispering something in her ear. She laughed it off, but it wasn't the kind of laugh you'd expect if everything was innocent. That's when it hit me. Something wasn't right. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to know what was really going on, and I wasn't just going to sit back and wait for her to tell me. So, I reached out to David, an old friend who works security at that same club. I didn't tell him why I was asking, just that I needed to know if he had seen anything unusual. The truth? I wasn't sure I wanted to know what he had to say, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening. After all the nights Sophie spent with Laura, ignoring me and brushing off my concerns, I knew it was time to stop pretending everything was fine. That video from Laura's Instagram haunted me. The way that guy was leaning into Sophie, way too close, and the way she didn't push him away. My gut was telling me something was happening, and this time, I wasn't going to sit idly by. That's when I called David. David had been a friend of mine for years. We played football together in high school, and he's always had my back. Even though we didn't hang out much these days, David was still a friend. He worked security at the club where Sophie and Laura spent so much of their time. So, I figured if anyone knew what was really going on during those innocent girls' nights out, it was probably him. I wasn't subtle about it. I flat out asked him if he'd noticed anything strange about Sophie's behavior. At first, he hesitated. Maybe he didn't want to get caught up in the drama, or maybe he didn't want to be the one to break the news to me. But after some pushing, David finally sighed and dropped the bomb I'd been dreading. I didn't want to say anything, but yeah, I saw her last Friday. She was getting cozy with some guy. His name was Ethan, I think. That name hit me like a punch to the gut, burning into my brain. I could feel my stomach drop, and a wave of nausea washed over me. Part of me wanted to hang up right there, pretend I never heard it, but I couldn't. I needed to know. I needed proof before I did anything rash. I can show you the footage if you want, David offered quietly. We've got cameras all over the place in the club. I paused for a moment, debating whether I could really handle seeing it. But, honestly, it wasn't curiosity that drove me. It was anger. Yeah, send it to me. The rest of the day felt like a blur, like I was walking through thick fog. I kept telling myself maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. I don't know why I even bothered lying to myself. When the footage finally came through, my heart was already racing, my hands trembling. I clicked on the file, and there was Sophie, sitting at the bar, laughing and flirting with some guy. I zoomed in. Sure enough, David wasn't lying. There he was, Ethan. At first, it started off innocently enough. Her hand brushed against his arm. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear. She didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled. That damn smile. It used to be mine. But here she was, throwing it at some guy I didn't even know. I watched as they got up, drinks in hand, and made their way through the crowd. The camera caught them slipping out of a side door, heading toward an alley behind the club. That's when everything changed. My breath hitched as they disappeared into a dark corner, hidden from most of the club's view, but not from the camera that captured every detail. Sophie backed up against the wall, and Ethan wasted no time. He pressed himself against her, and she didn't stop him. Hell, she encouraged it. They began getting closer, and it was clear they were sharing a moment that felt far too familiar. I felt a knot in my stomach as I watched her not pull away. She didn't resist for even a second. I was frozen. This wasn't just innocent flirting anymore. This wasn't harmless fun with a friend. No, this was something else, something much darker. I watched in disbelief as Sophie, my wife, behaved in a way I had never seen before. I felt my stomach turn. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't look away. Even though every fiber of my being wanted to, I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. Ethan pulled her aside into a dark corner, and they seemed to be in a heated moment, completely oblivious to their surroundings. She didn't even seem to care where they were or who could see them. It was like she didn't give a damn about me, about us. That was the moment I broke. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, my mind racing. Anger, betrayal, disgust. It all came crashing down on me at once. How the hell could she do this to me? How could she act so normal? Come home, kiss me, smile like nothing was wrong, and then sneak off to hook up with some guy behind a club? I wanted to scream, to hit something, to break everything in sight. But I didn't. Instead, I sat in silence, numb. The video kept playing in my head over and over. The sound of Sophie laughing, Ethan's hands all over her, the way she didn't even hesitate. I thought I was going to be sick. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Should I just walk out? The anger was boiling inside me, but I knew I had to keep my cool. I couldn't just lose it now. Not until I figured out my next move. Part of me still wanted to believe it was just a one-time thing, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. People don't just throw away their marriages for a quick fling. There had to be more. And I was going to find out. That night, Sophie came home like nothing had happened. Same routine. Same half-hearted smile. She told me she was tired and went straight to bed. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the door, wondering how she could look me in the eye after what I had just seen. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced with questions. What else had she done? How long had this been going on? I needed a plan. Something to make her face the consequences of what she had done. I wasn't going to sit back and let her get away with this. Not after everything I saw. I could have confronted her the second I saw that video, but what good would that do? A shouting match, her crying, begging for forgiveness, telling me it was all just a mistake? No way. I wasn't going to let her play the victim. No, I had to be smarter than that. I couldn't just lash out. I needed to play the long game. If Sophie thought she could get away with this, she was wrong. I was going to make sure she felt every bit of the betrayal. So, I kept my cool. When Sophie came home from another night out with Laura, I acted like everything was fine. I said nothing. I didn't give her any hint that I knew what was really going on, that I knew she was lying through her teeth. But inside, I was already planning her downfall, step by step. I wasn't about to be the fool, sitting back while she continued to mess around behind my back. No, I was going to make her regret every second of it. And that's when it hit me. Laura. If she thought she could screw me over with Ethan, I was going to do the same with her best friend. It wasn't like I hadn't thought about Laura before. She'd always been a little too touchy when Sophie wasn't around, always throwing me these flirty looks. We had this unspoken connection, little comments, playful glances, the kind of stuff you don't really act on when you're married. But now I had no reason to hold back. The first thing I needed to do was get Laura alone. Sophie didn't need to know. One afternoon when Sophie was out, I sent Laura a casual text, pretending I was just being friendly. Hey, you want to grab dinner sometime? It's been a while. I played it off like I just needed to escape from Sophie's drama. Honestly, that wasn't too far from the truth. Laura responded almost immediately, of course. She'd been waiting for a chance like this. I could feel it. The night we met up, I made sure to look the part. Sharp clothes, nice cologne. I had to make sure I came across just right. When we sat down for dinner, the flirting started right away. Laura leaned in a little too close, laughed at all my jokes, played with her hair. It was like I'd done this dance 1,000 times before, and I knew exactly how to keep her interested. We reminisced about old times, and she brought up a party we went to years ago, how drunk we all were, and how she kissed me. I saw the gleam in her eye as she mentioned it, like she was testing the waters. And I let her. I started flirting back, not too overtly at first, but it didn't take long before the tension between us was thick. I complimented her dress, told her how much I missed seeing her, how things had been tense with Sophie. By the time dinner was winding down, we were practically sitting on each other's laps. I didn't need to do anything else. Laura was all in. When she suggested we grab drinks at her place, I played it off like I didn't know exactly where this was going. At her place, the whole thing felt like one big game. Laura poured us both drinks, and before I knew it, we were sitting way too close on the couch. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. When she leaned in, I didn't pull away. We started kissing. Nothing subtle about it now. Her hands were in my hair. Mine were down her back. It didn't take long before things went from 0 to 100. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. Clothes started coming off right there on the couch. She was all over me, and I didn't stop it. I wanted this. No, I needed this. I needed to take control, to feel like I was finally the one calling the shots, like I was the one who could take something back. The next morning, when I woke up next to Laura, I didn't feel guilty. Not for a second. She was still asleep, tangled in the sheets, looking so peaceful. I grabbed my clothes, got dressed, and left before she could wake up. No need to stick around for any awkward small talk. This wasn't about her. It was about me. I was taking control, setting my plan in motion. I knew what was coming next. Divorce. I wasn't going to wait around for Sophie to own up to anything. No, I was way ahead of her. That same week, I called my lawyer, James. I told him everything. Well, almost everything. I didn't mention Laura. I just told him I had proof of Sophie's affair, and I wanted to move forward with a divorce. And I was going to make sure I came out on top. James was quick to act. He knew how to play the game, and I needed that. Let's keep this quiet for now, I told him. I want to surprise her with it. So, we started drafting the papers, handling all the legal mess, and making sure everything was in place so we could pull the rug out from under Sophie when the time was right. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances. I played the part of the good husband. I smiled when Sophie came home, asked her how her night was, pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was seething. Every time I saw her, every time she kissed me, I felt like I was going to snap. But I kept it together. I knew the longer I waited, the more satisfying it would be when everything came crashing down. When the time came to pull the trigger, I was ready. There's something about revenge that drives you. Something that gives you the energy to push through it all. Every time I thought about Sophie with that guy, Ethan, I felt my blood boil. But then I'd remember what was waiting for her. The divorce, the affair with Laura, and the wreckage I was about to bring down on her life. Just like she did to mine. And that's what kept me going. I wasn't just going to take back control. I was going to destroy everything she thought she knew and walk away with a smile on my face. It didn't take long for karma to find her. It's almost ironic how the universe has a way of paying people back for their lies. I didn't have to do much. Nature took care of the first part for me. At first, I just noticed the little changes. Sophie wasn't acting like herself. She was tired, on edge, and most noticeably, she wasn't hanging out with Laura as much. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she'd gotten tired of her wild nights, or maybe the guilt from all the things she'd been hiding was starting to catch up to her. But then I saw it. The panic in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she'd check her phone, like she was waiting for some terrible news. Something was definitely going on. Then, one afternoon, she came home looking pale, like she'd just received the worst news of her life. She didn't say a word to me, just went straight to the bedroom and shut the door. I knew right then that something was up. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. A few days later, I overheard her talking on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. She was in the bathroom, and the door was cracked just enough for me to catch bits of her conversation. It was about a doctor's appointment, something to do with test results. That's when it hit me. She had caught something. She actually caught something from one of her little affairs. Later that night, when she thought I was asleep, I saw her slip her phone under the covers, typing away like mad. I could only imagine what she was looking for. Symptoms, treatments, maybe even how to keep this from me. But there was no hiding it. Not from me. The next day, Sophie went to the doctor. I didn't have to follow her. I already knew. And when she came back, her face told the whole story. She was terrified. That night, she tried to act normal, but I could see she was unraveling. She barely touched her dinner, kept glancing at her phone, and when I asked if everything was okay, she snapped at me. "I'm fine. Just tired," she barked before storming off to bed. She thought she could play it cool, keep up her little act like nothing had happened. But I knew. I always knew. That's when I decided it was time to move to the next step in my plan. I wasn't going to let her suffer quietly with her secret. No, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who she was and what she had done. It wasn't hard to get the video of her and Ethan out there. A few anonymous uploads to local forums, a couple of messages to mutual friends, and boom, like wildfire, it spread. Social media took over from there. Within hours, the video had gone viral. People were sharing it, tagging each other, gossiping about how sweet, innocent Sophie had been caught on camera with some random guy behind a club. And of course, word got out about her little health problem. Apparently, someone at the doctor's office had loose lips, or maybe Sophie had confided in the wrong person. Either way, it didn't matter. The whole town knew. I sat back and watched it all unfold, just out of reach. My phone was blowing up with texts, friends, acquaintances, even some colleagues, all asking if I had seen the video, if I knew what had happened. Of course, I played it dumb, acted shocked and devastated, milking the sympathy for all it was worth. "I can't believe she'd do this to me," I said, making sure everyone knew I was the hurt, betrayed husband. But inside, I was savoring every second of it. Watching her life fall apart in real time was more satisfying than I ever imagined. She couldn't run from it. The shame, the humiliation, it followed her wherever she went. People who had once called themselves her friends suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. Her colleagues were avoiding her. Hell, even Laura, the one person who should have had her back, started distancing herself, probably afraid that her own dirty secrets would get dragged into the mess. The best part? Sophie had no idea it was me pulling the strings. She thought it was just bad luck that the video somehow leaked. She never once suspected that her loving husband was the one behind it all. Every night, I checked social media, scrolling through the comments, watching people tear her apart. Some of the comments were sympathetic, sure, but most of them weren't holding back. The whispers grew louder, and before long, Sophie was the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. I could see the toll it was taking on her. She stopped leaving the house unless she had to, and even then, she kept her head down, wearing sunglasses as if she could somehow escape the truth. But there was no hiding from this. It was everywhere. The disease, well, that was just the icing on the cake. People loved to talk, and when the rumors about her diagnosis started circulating, it didn't take long for the whispers to turn into full-blown accusations. Everyone knew, and I made sure they knew. Watching her squirm, watching her life fall apart while I stood back with my hands clean. Now that was the sweetest revenge I could have asked for. She couldn't hide from the consequences of what she'd done, and I was there, silently enjoying every minute of it. She deserved every second of it, and I wasn't done yet. The day I had been waiting for finally came. Every night, I'd replayed the scene in my mind, visualizing how it would unfold. I had laid the groundwork, biding my time, and now it was time to finish what Sophie had started. This wasn't just about getting revenge anymore. It was about taking back control, showing her just how badly she had messed up. My lawyer, James, had everything prepared. I'd spent the last few months gathering evidence, all neatly organized. The video of her affair, the rumors about her disease. It was all out there now. Sure, the public knew, but bringing it into a courtroom? That was a whole new level of humiliation. The atmosphere in the courtroom was colder than I expected. Sterile, almost suffocating. I sat beside James, my mind focused. I watched as Sophie walked in, looking like a shadow of the woman I once knew. She had lost weight, her eyes were hollow, and the confidence she used to carry was completely gone. Her lawyer, some guy she probably grabbed at the last minute, was doing his best, but it was clear he was outmatched. James leaned over and whispered, "This is going to be quick." We had her backed into a corner. I could feel the thrill building in me, but it wasn't nerves I was feeling. No, this was the satisfaction of knowing the end was finally here. I didn't even glance at Sophie. I couldn't. Not because I still cared, but because she wasn't worth a second of my attention anymore. She was a ghost in my life, and today, I was burying her for good. The negotiations were brutal. Her lawyer tried to play the sympathy card, talking about how Sophie had been struggling, how she'd lost her job because of the scandal, how the public humiliation had been enough of a punishment. But James wasn't buying it. "We're not here to discuss her personal feelings," James said, his tone cool and professional, barely acknowledging the other lawyer. "We're here to divide assets based on facts." And the facts were clear. She cheated. She ruined our marriage. And I had the evidence to prove it. James didn't waste any time. He presented the video. He laid out the details of her affair and the proof of her recklessness. Her lawyer tried to object, but it was pointless. The evidence was undeniable. Sophie's betrayal, her lies. It was all there for everyone to see. It was over. I could feel the tension in the room as the judge reviewed the evidence. I didn't need to speak. Everything was laid bare. Sophie sat there, eyes locked on the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Her lawyer stammered through a weak defense, but it was clear to everyone in that room that she had no ground to stand on. Finally, the judge spoke, and it felt like hearing the final nail being hammered into her coffin. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, "I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Dan. He will retain the majority of the shared assets, including the marital home. Mrs. Sophie will be responsible for settling any remaining debts and will have no claim to spousal support." That was it. I had won the house, the assets, the life we had built together. It was all mine. Sophie? She was left with nothing but the consequences of her actions. The moment the ruling came down, I glanced at her. She was pale, trembling, still staring at the floor as if it might swallow her whole. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. This was exactly what she deserved. As we left the courtroom, James turned to me with a satisfied smirk. Well, that went even better than expected. Yeah, I said, my voice thick with satisfaction. It did. Sophie didn't say a word as she left the courtroom. I watched her from a distance. She walked out with her shoulders slumped, the weight of everything crashing down on her. Her reputation was already in ruins, and now she had nothing left. No career, no assets, no future. She had burned it all to the ground, and I had only lit the match. In the weeks that followed, things only got worse for her. Word spread quickly. Her colleagues started cutting ties. Who would want to be associated with someone whose dirty laundry had been aired so publicly? No one wanted to work with her. No one wanted to be seen with her. The scandal had stuck, and it was clear she wasn't going to recover from it anytime soon. Sophie tried to hold on for a while, thinking maybe she could rebuild something from the ashes. But there was nothing left for her here. Eventually, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was selling off the last of her belongings. She was packing up what little she had left and leaving town. I didn't care where she went. I didn't care what she did. All that mattered to me was that she was gone. I imagined her somewhere in some small apartment in another city, starting over with nothing. No friends, no career, just the hollow echo of her own mistakes, following her everywhere she went. It was fitting. She had always craved more excitement, more freedom, and now she had all the space in the world, just not the life she used to have. Her departure didn't cause a stir. It was almost as if she vanished overnight, slipping away quietly, hoping the world would forget her. But no one would. Not after what she did. But they wouldn't forget. Not after what she'd done. The affair, the scandal, the disease. It all stuck with you. Some things just couldn't be erased. As for me, I walked away with everything intact. The house, the assets, and most importantly, the peace of mind knowing I'd come out on top. Sophie thought she could break me, but in the end, she only tore herself apart. And I was more than okay with watching it all unravel. It's strange how, when everything settles, you start to see things clearly. The anger, the chaos, the burning desire for revenge, they all start to fade. What's left is something simple. I won. I got my life back, and I was done carrying the weight of the past. After everything fell apart for Sophie, my life began to rebuild. With the house in my name, my financial situation secure, and no lingering ties to her, I could breathe. I could finally start fresh. There was something freeing about it. No more pretending, no more dodging her lies. Just clarity. As for Laura, I cut ties with her too. After our night together, I had no reason to keep her around. She wasn't part of my future. Besides, she and Sophie were no longer speaking, and I didn't need that kind of drama in my life. It was time to erase that chapter completely. Rebuilding wasn't as tough as I thought it would be. At first, there was this eerie silence, like a space that needed filling. But it passed. I reached out to old friends, people I hadn't seen in ages because I'd been too consumed with trying to salvage my marriage. We started meeting up, grabbing drinks, laughing, and it felt like a weight was lifting. Opportunities started appearing. A couple of my old friends had businesses, and they offered me a chance to come on board. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a solid start. It gave me the stability I needed to move forward. Little by little, everything began to fall back into place. The best part? It was all mine now. No more secrets. No more burdens. Of course, Sophie tried to reach out. I'd known it was coming. It was inevitable. She'd burned every bridge she had. Her career, her friends, everything she had built. So naturally, she tried to come crawling back to me. One night, I saw her name pop up on my phone. I stared at it for a moment. I wasn't shocked, but there was a small part of me that wondered what she could possibly want now. An apology? Closure? Or maybe just a final stab at a reconciliation? I didn't hesitate. I deleted the message and blocked her number. There was no point in responding. Sophie was part of a past I had already put behind me. She made her choices, and I made mine. We were strangers now, and that's how it was going to stay. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The whole mess faded into the background, like it had never happened. People moved on. The gossip cooled. The whole situation became nothing but a distant memory. I drive through town sometimes, past places that used to matter. The cafe where Sophie and I had our first date. The bar where Laura and I shared that last drink. It all felt like it belonged to someone else. That version of me, the one who tried to keep a marriage together, the one who was constantly battling for something that was slipping away, he didn't exist anymore. Now, I was someone new. Someone who had been through hell and come out on the other side. Someone who was free. I didn't know where Sophie ended up, and truthfully, I didn't care. Wherever she was a ghost from my past. The town had forgotten her, and so had I. I imagined her in a small, dingy apartment, scrolling through old photos of the life she used to have. But that wasn't my problem anymore. She was gone, and I wasn't wasting another second thinking about her. The future was mine. It was open and full of possibilities, and I could feel it. The weight was gone. There was no longer a shadow of the past hanging over me. I had walked through the fire and come out the other side, stronger. And now, I was stepping into something better. One evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sun set. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with soft oranges and purples. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Sophie was gone. Laura was gone. The pain, the anger, the revenge, it was all behind me. And in this quiet moment, I realized I was standing at the edge of a brand new life. A life that had nothing to do with her, nothing to do with the past, only the future.